Welcome to Animal Uncovered, the podcast where we explore the most unbelievable life cycles in the natural world. From the moment life begins to the moment it ends, nothing is as simple as it seems. Somewhere beneath the surface of a warm tropical sea, the world is alive in ways that defy easy description. Sunlight filters down through the upper water column in long shifting columns, bending and scattering as it passes through wave after gentle wave. The water here is not silent. It hums and clicks and pops with the constant negotiation of 10,000 creatures, each locked into its own urgent drama of survival. Coral formations rise from the seafloor in dense, tangled architectures, branch and dome and fan, and between them, the reef teems with a density of life found almost nowhere else on this planet. Fish drift in loose schools, their flanks catching the light. Sea urchins inch slowly across the substrate. A small octopus tucked into a crevice watches everything with ancient amber eyes. The reef, for all its beauty, is a place of unrelenting competition. For space, for food, for survival from one tide to the next. And there, at the base of a coral head, almost invisible against the mottled sand, is a small dark opening, a burrow, perhaps 15 centimetres across, modest, even unremarkable, the kind of feature your eye passes over without much thought. But something lives inside it, and if you were to kneel in the sand beside that burrow, if you were to slow your breathing and hold perfectly still, you would notice that the darkness inside it is not empty. There are two small raised structures at the entrance, moving in slow, deliberate arcs. They are stalked eyes, compound eyes of extraordinary construction, rotating independently, scanning the reef in directions that no human eye could follow simultaneously. For a long moment, nothing happens. Then, without warning, the creature emerges. It moves with a kind of controlled urgency. Its body long and segmented, its coloration a vivid arrangement of greens and blues and purples that no camouflage could explain. This animal is not hiding, it is advertising itself. It moves forward into the open water with purpose, its foremost appendages folded tightly beneath its body, compressed like springs, like a mechanism waiting to be released. A small snail has settled on the reef nearby, grazing on algae entirely unaware. What happens next is faster than you can follow with your eye. What happens next, in fact, is one of the fastest biological movements ever recorded in the animal kingdom. The foremost appendages unfurl and strike in a motion that takes place over the course of approximately 0.008 of a second, a duration so brief that it registers not as an event, but as its aftermath. The snail's shell, reinforced calcium carbonate that has taken months to build, shatters on impact. The reef shudders, almost imperceptibly from the force of the blow. The creature retrieves what remains of its prey and retreats to the burrow entrance to feed. Methodical, unhurried, already scanning the reef again with those extraordinary eyes. You've just witnessed one of the ocean's most remarkable and least celebrated predators at work. It is smaller than your hand. It hunts on a sun-drenched reef in warm, shallow water. It is ancient in its lineage and astonishing in its biology. It possesses sensory equipment that makes human vision seem, by comparison, almost impoverished. And it has been here, in one form or another, for hundreds of millions of years. Punching, stalking, defending, reproducing, surviving. In a world it has shaped and been shaped in equal measure. This is the Mantis shrimp. Part 1. Why this animal matters. To call the mantis shrimp a shrimp is in many ways a profound understatement. It is a member of the order Stomatopoda, a group of crustaceans that branched away from the lineage of crabs, lobsters, and true shrimps so long ago that the two groups have had hundreds of millions of years to diverge. The mantis shrimp is, in a sense, a crustacean that took an entirely different path, and the path it took is extraordinary. There are roughly 550 known species of stomatopod. They range in size from a few centimetres to nearly 40 centimetres in length. They inhabit shallow tropical and subtropical waters across the globe, from the coral reefs of the Indo-Pacific to the rocky seafloors of the Caribbean, from the warm shallows of the Red Sea to the sandy lagoons of the Pacific Islands. And while they vary enormously in size, colour, and behaviour, they share two features that have made them the subject of intense fascination among scientists, engineers, and anyone who has ever encountered them. The first is their raptorial appendages, the pair of specialised front limbs that the mantis shrimp uses to strike, stab, or smash its prey. These appendages, which fold beneath the body when not in use, are capable of delivering a blow of remarkable violence. Depending on the species, they function either as spears, sharp, pointed structures designed to impale fast-moving prey like fish, or as hammers, dense calcified clubs capable of fracturing the shells of mollusks, crabs, and other heavily armoured animals. The force generated by these strikes has been measured at up to 1,500 newtons. The acceleration involved rivals that of a bullet leaving the barrel of a firearm. And crucially, even as the physical appendage moves, something else happens. The strike produces a cavitation bubble, a brief localized collapse of pressure in the surrounding water that generates its own secondary shock wave. Even a near miss, in other words, can stun or injure prey. The mantis shrimp does not merely strike, it sends a shock wave through the water as its calling card. The second extraordinary feature is its eyes. Human beings are trichromats. Our colour vision is built on three types of cone photoreceptor, sensitive to broadly red, green and blue wavelengths of light. We perceive the world through a combination of those three signals and regard our colour vision as rich and detailed. The mantis shrimp possesses 16 types of photoreceptor. It can perceive ultraviolet light and infrared light. It can detect polarized light, light that has been filtered and aligned in a single plane of oscillation, with a sensitivity that no other animal on Earth can match. For decades, scientists assumed that this must mean the mantis shrimp perceives a visual world of overwhelming richness and complexity. The truth, as we've come to understand it, is more interesting and more strange than that, and we will return to it in detail later. But these two features, the strike and the eyes, are the twin pillars of what makes the mantis shrimp so compelling. It is a creature that has evolved through deep time and fierce selective pressure into something that resembles, in the most fundamental biological sense, a precision weapon with a surveillance system attached. And it is barely the length of a human hand. The question that drives everything that follows is simple, though the answer is anything but. How does a creature of such modest physical size come to dominate its corner of the underwater world? How does it grow, hunt, reproduce, and survive across a lifespan that can stretch to 2 decades? What forces shaped it, and what role does it play in the reef communities it inhabits? To answer those questions, we need to start at the very beginning, not of an individual life, but of an entire lineage. Part 2. Evolution and Origins. The story of the mantis shrimp begins not in the warm shallows of a modern coral reef, but in deep geological time, in seas that predate the continents as we know them, that lapped against coastlines that no map would recognize. Stomatopods first appear in the fossil record during the Devonian period, roughly 400 million years ago. That places their origins before the age of dinosaurs, before the first forests covered the land, before the ancestors of modern amphibians had fully committed to a terrestrial existence. The world's oceans, already ancient, were already complex, and within them, the lineage that would eventually produce the mantis, shrimp was already diverging from other crustacean groups, already developing the specialized body plan that would come to define its descendants. The earliest stomatopods were not identical to their modern relatives. They were simpler, less specialized, and the remarkable raptorial appendages that define the group today took many millions of years to reach their present state of refinement. But even in their earliest forms, these animals appear to have been active, mobile predators, animals that hunted rather than scavenged, that pursued prey rather than waiting for it to arrive. What drove this specialization? The answer lies in the nature of ecological competition. The Paleozoic and Mesozoic seas were not empty. They were filled with an increasingly diverse array of prey animals, many of them well protected. Mollusks had evolved thick, reinforced shells. Crabs and other crustaceans had developed their own armoured exoskeletons. For a predator looking to access these food sources, brute strength was not enough. What was needed was a delivery mechanism, a way to concentrate force at a single point and apply it with enough speed and precision to overcome even the most robust natural armour. The raptorial appendage is the stomatopod's answer to that problem, and it is, by almost any engineering standard, an elegant one. Through the Mesozoic, stomatopods diversified and spread. At one point, roughly 250 species are thought to have existed, with body plans more varied than anything alive today. Many of these lineages went extinct during the great mass extinction events that punctuated Earth's history. What survived were the ancestors of modern stomatopods, streamlined, versatile, increasingly adapted to the shallow reef and sea floor environments that would define their ecological niche. Today, mantis shrimps are found throughout tropical and subtropical waters, with the greatest diversity concentrated in the Indo-Pacific region. The coral reefs of Australia, Indonesia, the Philippines, and the broader Pacific Islands are particularly rich in stomatopod species, but they are found across a wide range, in the Caribbean, in the Red Sea, in the warm shallows of the Indian Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico. Wherever there is warm, shallow water, soft sediment or rocky substrate for burrow construction, and a reasonable density of the prey they prefer, mantis shrimps tend to find a foothold. Their habitats vary by species. Some prefer sandy or muddy seafloors, where they excavate long U-shaped burrows in the soft substrate. Others occupy cavities in coral rock, expanding and defending these spaces over time. A few are found in rubble zones, the broken coral debris that accumulates at reef margins, where they shelter among the fragments. In nearly all cases, the burrow is central to mantis shrimp life. It is home, refuge, nursery, and hunting platform. It is the fixed point around which their entire existence rotates. To understand why, we need to follow the life of a mantis shrimp from the very beginning. Part 3, the life cycle. Phase 1. Birth and the earliest days. Every mantis shrimp begins as an egg. The female broods her eggs with a kind of dedication that is rare among crustaceans. She holds them in her foremost appendages, the same appendages that serve as weapons, rolling and aerating them, keeping them clean, guarding them from predators and fungal infection. For a creature so well armed, This brooding behaviour is a study in tenderness of function, if not of form. The clutch may contain anywhere from several hundred to tens of thousands of eggs, depending on the species and the size of the female. The incubation period varies with water temperature, but typically spans several weeks. As the embryos develop inside their translucent shells, they pass through increasingly complex stages of organization, from simple cell clusters to miniature animals with rudimentary structures, the beginnings of eyes, of segmentation, of appendages folded inside the egg membrane. When they hatch, they do not emerge as miniature versions of their parents. They enter the world as larvae, transparent, fragile, and destined for a life in the open ocean that their parents would never choose. This larval phase is one of the least understood aspects of mantis shrimp biology, and it is a remarkable departure from the life of the adult. The newly hatched larvae are planktonic. They drift with the currents, part of the vast, largely invisible community of small animals that inhabit the open water. They are carried by tides and thermal gradients across distances that may be considerable, sometimes spreading larvae far from the reef where they were born. For the larva, these weeks in the open water are a period of profound vulnerability. They are small, transparent, and essentially defenseless against the filterers and visual predators that patrol the planktonic community. Mortality during this stage is, by any measure, enormous. Of the hundreds or thousands of eggs that a female broods, only a tiny fraction of the resulting larvae will survive long enough to settle back onto a suitable reef. Evolution has accommodated this loss by making the surviving larvae extraordinarily robust and adaptable, but the arithmetic of early life for a mantis shrimp is sobering. The larval stages, and there are multiple, as the animal molts and grows through a series of increasingly complex forms, typically last anywhere from several weeks to a few months. Some species have been observed to spend longer in the water column under certain oceanographic conditions. Throughout this period, the larvae are feeding, growing, and gradually developing the body plan that will eventually allow them to make the transition to a benthic or bottom-dwelling existence. When that transition comes, when the larva is large enough and developmentally ready to leave the water column, it sinks toward the seafloor and begins the search for a suitable place to settle. This is another moment of great peril. The reef and seafloor are not welcoming environments for a small, soft-bodied animal with no burrow and no established territory. Finding shelter quickly is not optional. It is existential. Phase 2. The juvenile phase. A newly settled juvenile mantis shrimp is a remarkably different creature from the adult it will eventually become. It is small, often just a centimetre or two in length, and its raptorial appendages, while present, are not yet the weapons they will become. Its exoskeleton is relatively soft. Its eyes, already more complex than those of most animals, have not yet reached their full development. It is, in the language of ecology, a vulnerable animal in a dangerous environment. The juvenile's first priority is shelter. In species that inhabit sandy or muddy substrates, this means excavating a burrow, a process that begins almost immediately after settlement, using its appendages to shift sediment and compact the walls of a small cavity. In species that prefer rock or coral rubble, it means finding and occupying an existing cavity, which may require displacing a smaller or weaker occupant. Once shelter is secured, the juvenile begins the long process of growing into an adult. Mantis shrimps, like all crustaceans, grow through molting, the periodic shedding of the old exoskeleton, to allow for an increase in body size. Before each molt, the animal reabsorbs much of the calcium and other minerals from its outgoing shell, using them to begin the construction of the new, larger one beneath. When the moment of molting arrives, The old shell splits along specific seam lines and the animal pulls itself free. For a brief period, hours to days, depending on the species and the individual, the mantis shrimp is soft, pale, and almost entirely defenseless. Its appendages lack their striking power. Its body lacks its rigidity. This is predictably one of the most dangerous periods of a mantis shrimp's life. During this window, it retreats as deeply as possible into its burrow and does not emerge. The new exoskeleton hardens relatively quickly as calcium is redeposited from seawater and from the stored minerals the animal absorbed from its old shell. But until that process is complete, the mantis shrimp is as vulnerable as it will ever be. Molting happens frequently during the juvenile phase, multiple times per year, because the animal is growing rapidly. As it grows, each molt produces a proportionally larger animal with progressively more powerful appendages and increasingly sophisticated sensory equipment. The juvenile mantis shrimp spent a great deal of its time in the early months learning, through trial and experience, how to locate, approach, and strike prey effectively. It practices, there's no other word for it, the coordination of its sensory systems and its raptorial appendages, refining the timing and aim of its strikes through repeated attempts. Young mantis shrimps are not as accurate or as devastating as adults. Skill, in the most literal functional sense, improves with experience. Phase 3. Survival. The coral reef, for all its beauty, is not a kind place for a young mantis shrimp. The list of animals that will attempt to eat a juvenile stomatopod is considerable. Reef fish, wrasses, triggerfish, large groupers are alert to any small crustacean moving across the open substrate. Octopuses, whose intelligence and flexibility allow them to probe burrows and crevices with their arms, are persistent predators of mantis shrimps at all life stages, though adult mantis shrimps are more than capable of fighting back against even a determined octopus. Larger crustaceans may attempt to displace or consume smaller ones. Even other mantis shrimps, larger, more established individuals, will not hesitate to eliminate a competitor if the opportunity arises. Against these threats, the juvenile mantis shrimp has several defenses. Its burrow is its primary protection, and it does not venture far from the entrance when feeding. Its coloration, often cryptic in juveniles, before the vivid adult coloration develops, provides some concealment against the reef background. And even at juvenile sizes, the raptorial appendages are capable of delivering a painful and potentially injurious strike to any animal foolish enough to reach into the burrow after it. Competition for territory begins early. Burrows in suitable substrate are a limited resource, and juveniles are frequently displaced by larger, stronger individuals. Not only adults of their own species, but sometimes adult animals of other species occupying the same habitat. The response to displacement is immediate. Find new shelter as quickly as possible before exposure to open water becomes fatal. This competitive pressure is one of the key drivers of the mantis shrimp's combative temperament. An animal that does not defend its burrow aggressively is an animal that will lose it. Phase 4. Maturity. By the time a mantis shrimp has reached adulthood, a process that may take anywhere from 1 to 2 years, depending on species and environmental conditions, it has been transformed. The raptorial appendages in a smashing species are now dense, calcified structures of considerable mass. The striking surface, the dactyl heel in smashers, is reinforced with hydroxyapatite, the same mineral compound found in vertebrate bone, arranged in a helicoidal microstructure that distributes stress in all directions, preventing the kind of crack propagation that would shatter most materials under repeated impact. An adult mantis shrimp can deliver hundreds of strikes to hard-shelled prey without damaging its own weapon. This is not a biological accident. It is the product of hundreds of millions of years of selection pressure acting on an animal that has always needed its primary tool to be both devastating and durable. The striking mechanism itself is remarkable in its engineering. Mantis shrimps do not simply swing their appendage at prey, as a vertebrate might swing a limb. Instead, they load it, compressing a saddle-shaped spring structure in the thorax and latching it under muscular tension. When the latch is released, the energy stored in that spring is delivered to the appendage in a fraction of the time it would take the muscles alone to move it. This is a catapult mechanism, biological in its origin but mechanical in its precision. The result is a strike that achieves peak velocities of around 23 meters per second, roughly 80 kilometers per hour, with an acceleration of 10,000 times the force of gravity. For smasher species, the primary targets are hard-shelled prey: snails, clams, hermit crabs, and small crabs. The mantis shrimp selects its target with its eyes, approaches to within optimal striking distance, and then delivers its blow with a precision that is the product of years of refinement. A single, well-placed strike can kill or immobilize the prey. A second and third strike, if needed, will open the shell completely and expose the soft tissue within. Spearer species operate differently. Their raptorial appendages terminate in sharp, barbed points rather than blunt hammers, and their prey are primarily soft-bodied animals, small fish and shrimp that move quickly through the water column just above the seafloor. Spearers hunt by concealment, waiting at the entrance of their burrows and launching a lightning strike at any suitable prey that passes within range. The barbed spines prevent the prey from escaping once impaled. Both strategies are extraordinarily effective. Adult mantis shrimps are apex predators within their immediate territories. Few reef animals can match them for strike speed, and fewer still are willing to press an attack against an animal that can break a human finger with a single blow. The burrow, in adulthood, is more than shelter. It is a command center. The mantis shrimp knows its immediate environment with a precision born of long familiarity. It knows where prey tends to appear, which directions offer the best approaches, which neighbouring burrow holders might be competitors or eventually potential mates. It patrols, it observes, it waits, with an economy of effort that suggests not passivity but mastery. An animal so capable within its own small territory that effort, when required, needs only to be brief. Phase 5. Reproduction. When the time comes to reproduce, the mantis shrimp's social life becomes temporarily considerably more complex. Many stomatopod species are monogamous across at least a single breeding season, an unusual characteristic among crustaceans. In some longer-lived species, pair bonds may persist across multiple seasons. The male, typically the more colourful of the pair in many species, must approach a female's burrow and signal his intentions, without triggering the defensive response that would ordinarily greet any approaching animal. This is not a trivial challenge. A female mantis shrimp encountering an unfamiliar animal near her burrow will strike first and ask no questions later. The male's courtship behaviour must be precisely calibrated to inhibit that defensive reflex. A combination of specific movement patterns, chemical signals carried in the urine, and visual displays of his own raptorial appendages and body coloration that signal species identity and reproductive readiness. Once pair bond formation begins, courtship can be surprisingly prolonged. Partners may share a burrow for extended periods before actual mating occurs. During this time, there are a constant negotiation of space and hierarchy, two armed predators in close confinement, learning to tolerate and ultimately cooperate with each other. Mating itself occurs during the brief period around a female's molt, when her exoskeleton is soft and copulation is physically possible. The male guards the female assiduously during this vulnerable period, both from external predators and from other males who might attempt to displace him. After fertilization, the female broods the eggs. She holds them constantly, rolling the clutch with her maxillips, small appendages near the mouth, to aerate the eggs and remove any particles that might promote fungal growth. During this brooding period, which may last several weeks, she rarely leaves the burrow and feeds significantly less than normal. It is a period of intense physical investment in her offspring, a commitment that, given the scale of egg mortality during the planktonic larval stage, yields returns that are, statistically, modest but evolutionarily sufficient. In some species, both parents are involved in egg care, sharing the brooding duties, a level of biparental care that is remarkable in any invertebrate. In others, the female is the sole carer, and the male departs once the clutch is secured. Reproductive cycles in mantis shrimps are influenced by environmental conditions, particularly water temperature and the availability of food. In the tropics, where conditions are relatively stable, some species may breed multiple times per year. In more seasonal environments, breeding may be concentrated in the warmer months. Throughout their reproductive lives, which can span many years, individuals may produce many clutches, an aggregate reproductive output that is considerable, even accounting for the high mortality of early life stages. Phase 6. Longevity and the inevitability of endings. A mantis shrimp, if it is fortunate, may live for up to 20 years. This is an unusually long lifespan for a crustacean of its size. Most invertebrates of comparable dimensions measure their lives in months, or, at most, 2 or 3 years. The mantis shrimp's longevity is not fully understood. It is likely a product of its effective predator defenses, its burrow-centered lifestyle, and the relative stability of the tropical reef environments it inhabits. But longevity does not mean invulnerability. The threats that shadow a mantis shrimp throughout its life, predation, competition, environmental change, do not diminish with age. An older mantis shrimp may be larger and more experienced, its strikes more powerful and precise, its burrow more firmly established. But it is not immune. Aging brings its own challenges. Molting, which continues throughout the mantis shrimp's life, becomes less frequent in older animals, but no less risky. The window of vulnerability between shedding the old exoskeleton and hardening the new one remains a potential death sentence at any age. A predator that discovers a recently molted mantis shrimp, regardless of the animal's experience or reputation, has found a genuinely defenseless target. Disease, parasitism, and the accumulated physical damage of years of striking can all take their toll. The dactyl heel of a smasher species, despite its extraordinary engineering, is not indestructible over a lifetime of use. Evidence of wear and minor fractures has been observed in older specimens, though the helicoidal structure of the material limits the propagation of any given crack with remarkable efficiency. Environmental disruption is an increasingly significant factor. Warming seas, bleaching coral, and degraded water quality do not kill a mantis shrimp outright in most cases, but they degrade the habitat, reducing prey availability, destabilizing the substrate, and disrupting the biological community that supports and surrounds the animal. An old mantis shrimp in a degraded reef is, in fundamental ecological terms, an animal on borrowed time. When death comes, through predation, disease, or simply the slow attrition of a long life in a competitive environment, the reef absorbs it without ceremony. The burrow, so carefully excavated and defended, becomes available to the next occupant. The cycle, without pause, continues. Part 4. Biology and Adaptations. To truly understand the mantis shrimp is to understand that almost every system in its body has been refined by evolution into something that exceeds what you would reasonably expect from an animal of its size and phylum. Begin with the eyes. The mantis shrimp's eyes are compound, built from thousands of individual facets, like the eyes of an insect. But they are compound eyes of a wholly different order of sophistication. Each eye sits atop a movable stalk and can rotate independently in virtually any direction. More than that, each eye is divided into 3 distinct regions that function semi-independently. 2 broad hemispherical regions providing wide-field vision and a narrow midband region, a strip of specialized cells running across the center of the eye that handles the most complex visual processing. It is in this midband that the stomatopod's most remarkable visual adaptations reside. The midband rows contain the 16 types of photoreceptor mentioned earlier, a number that dwarfs the 3 of human vision or the 4 found in some birds and reptiles. These receptors are tuned to wavelengths across a broad spectrum, from the near ultraviolet through the visible range and into the near infrared. The mantis shrimp can perceive colours across this entire range, though, as more recent research has revealed, its colour discrimination in the fine-grained sense may be less sophisticated than once assumed. Here is the intriguing paradox at the heart of mantis shrimp vision. Despite having 16 photoreceptor types, behavioural experiments have suggested that they are relatively poor at distinguishing between colours that are spectrally close together. Colours that a human, with only 3 photoreceptors, would distinguish easily through the comparative processing of signals. What the mantis shrimp appears to do instead is treat each photoreceptor type as an essentially binary detector. Either the signal is above threshold or it is not, and use this system not for fine colour discrimination but for extremely rapid, highly parallel identification of wavelength categories. It is less like painting a detailed colour portrait and more like reading a barcode at speed. Not the richest possible representation of visual information, but perhaps the fastest. This makes sense for an animal that needs to identify prey, rivals and potential mates in milliseconds, in conditions of variable and rapidly changing light, without the luxury of extended visual processing time. Speed of identification in the mantis shrimp's world may be worth more than depth of color resolution. The sensitivity to polarized light is, in many ways, even more remarkable. Polarized light, filtered and oriented light, is largely invisible to humans without equipment, but the mantis shrimp's mid-band photoreceptors are arranged to detect it with extraordinary precision. The biological structures that achieve this, transparent waveguide-like tubes overlying the photoreceptor cells, are more efficient than any synthetic polarization filter yet manufactured. Polarized light reflects differently off biological tissues than off inorganic surfaces, and in a reef environment rich in animals whose bodies reflect polarized light in distinctive patterns, the ability to detect and process it provides the mantis shrimp with an entire channel of information that is simply invisible to most other reef inhabitants. It is, in effect, a private visual frequency, a communication channel that only stomatopods can access. And this brings us to colour and communication. Mantis shrimps are often vivid in their coloration. The peacock mantis shrimp, arguably the best-known species, is a mosaic of electric greens, blues, oranges and reds that defies any evolutionary explanation rooted in camouflage. These colours are used in communication. Between rivals, they form part of the threat display arsenal, a mantis shrimp that fully extends its raptorial appendages and presents its maxillopedes, the highly patterned appendages near its head, is performing a visual signal that carries an unambiguous message to any stomatopod capable of reading it. Between potential mates, these displays function in courtship. Critically, some of these colour patterns reflect ultraviolet light or polarised light in ways that are entirely invisible to predators without stomatopod-grade visual equipment. This gives mantis shrimps the ability to communicate with each other in what amounts to a secret channel, a form of visual signalling that is, for most of their predators, completely undetectable. The exoskeleton that houses all of this biology is itself a marvel. The dactyl heel of smashers has already been described in terms of its mineral composition and helicoidal structure, but the rest of the body is also notable for its balance of rigidity and flexibility. The telson, the broad plate-like final segment of the tail, is reinforced with structures that allow it to function as a shield in tail-to-tail combat between rival individuals, absorbing impact without catastrophic failure. The joints between body segments are designed to allow the fluid, sinuous locomotion that makes mantis shrimps such effective burrowers and surprisingly quick open water swimmers when necessary. In terms of hunting strategy, the mantis shrimp is a specialist that is also generalist enough to adapt. Smashers will adjust their behaviour depending on prey type, attacking at different angles, delivering repeated strikes in rapid succession to particularly robust shells, or abandoning a target if the cost-benefit calculation is unfavourable. Spearers time their ambushes with precision, selecting the moment to strike based on the speed and direction of the approaching prey. These are not simple reflex behaviours. They involve sensory assessment, decision-making, and the kind of behavioural flexibility that ethologists associate with cognitively sophisticated animals. Part 5. Ecosystem Role. Place the mantis shrimp in the context of the reef, and its significance expands considerably beyond the individual. As a predator, the mantis shrimp is a controlling force on prey populations within its territory. A single individual, over the course of a year, consumes a substantial quantity of mollusks, small crustaceans or fish, depending on its type. In habitats where mantis shrimps are abundant, and on healthy reefs, they can be surprisingly common, with several individuals occupying adjacent burrows within a small area. Their aggregate predation impact on local snail, clam, and crab populations is ecologically significant. They prevent any single prey species from becoming dominant, thereby maintaining the diversity and balance of the broader invertebrate community. As burrow engineers, they perform a rather different but equally important service. The act of burrowing, of excavating sediment, mixing and aerating it, bringing deeper material to the surface, is a process ecologists call bioturbation. Mantis shrimps are vigorous bioturbitors. In sandy and muddy reef environments, their burrow construction and maintenance continuously turns over the substrate, which promotes oxygenation of sediments, releases buried nutrients, and provides incidental habitat for smaller organisms that shelter in the disturbed areas around burrow openings. Remove the mantis shrimps from such an environment, and the sediment becomes more compacted, less oxygenated, and less productive. Their burrows also provide shelter for other species, small fish, gobies, and various invertebrates that would otherwise struggle to find suitable refuge on an otherwise featureless substrate. This associative habitat creation is not something the mantis shrimp intends, but it is a real ecological byproduct of their burrow-building behavior. In the broader network of reef predators, mantis shrimps occupy a niche that overlaps with, but is not identical to that of other mid-level predators. Their specialization on hard-shelled prey, in the case of smashers, means that they occupy a distinct functional role that relatively few other reef animals can match. Most reef fish lack the jaw strength to consistently crack the shells that a mantis shrimp splits with a single blow. They are, in ecological terms, a keystone predator for their particular prey guild. Competition between mantis shrimps and other predators is real but typically indirect. A large grouper or moray eel will readily eat a mantis shrimp if it can catch one, and may do so regularly enough to influence mantis shrimp density in some areas. Octopuses are persistent competitors, both for prey and for burrow space, and interactions between octopuses and mantis shrimps can be extended and dramatic, with neither animal easily conceding defeat. But these competitive pressures are part of the equilibrium rather than a threat to it. They keep mantis shrimp populations at levels that are sustainable relative to their prey base, and they ensure that the reef remains a complex interlocking community rather than a system dominated by a single predator. Part 6. Human Connection and Conservation. Human beings have known about mantis shrimps for as long as we've harvested marine food resources. Coastal communities across the Indo-Pacific have long regarded them as a food source. In many parts of Southeast Asia and the Mediterranean, they are consumed regularly, valued for the sweetness of their flesh. Fishing communities have encountered them in trawl nets and traps for centuries, often discovering somewhat painfully that an apparently small crustacean can inflict a surprisingly serious injury on an unguarded hand. But the scientific fascination with mantis shrimps is a more recent affair, and it has grown rapidly as the tools available to study them have improved. The discovery of the full complexity of their raptorial strike mechanism through high-speed cinematography and force measurement in the late 20th century was genuinely transformative for both biology and materials science. The helicoidal structure of the dactyl heel attracted the attention of engineers looking to design impact-resistant materials, structures that could absorb repeated high-energy blows without catastrophic failure. This design principle, layering fibers in a rotating stack so that cracks propagating in any direction encounter a fresh fiber orientation, has since been explored for applications ranging from body armor to aircraft panels to automobile components. The mantis shrimp, in this sense, is not merely an animal of scientific interest, but a source of biological patent that may shape the materials we build with for decades to come. The polarization-sensitive visual system has attracted its own cluster of engineering interest. Synthetic polarization detectors inspired by the stomatopod's biological structures have been proposed for use in cancer detection. Certain tumor tissues reflect polarized light differently from healthy tissue, as well as in underwater optical communication systems, where polarized light can carry information through water more effectively than conventional signaling. The mantis shrimp, it turns out, solved an optical engineering problem that human technology is still working to match. The study of stomatopod vision more broadly has become one of the richest areas of research in sensory biology. The question of how an animal processes 16 photoreceptor types, and what the subjective experience of such a visual system might be, if that question is even meaningful, has generated debates that span neuroscience, philosophy, and evolutionary biology. The mantis shrimp has become a kind of benchmark organism, an extreme case that forces researchers to re-examine assumptions about what colour vision is for and how differently it can be implemented across the animal kingdom. In popular culture, the mantis shrimp has achieved a peculiar celebrity. A widely shared internet comic introduced it to a global audience, emphasizing both its visual system and its strike force in terms that were vivid if not always entirely accurate. This popular attention has been on balance beneficial. The mantis shrimp is now far better known than its ecological role would otherwise warrant, and this notoriety is translated in some cases into greater public interest in the reef ecosystems it inhabits. That interest is urgently needed. Coral reefs, the primary habitat of the majority of mantis shrimp species, are among the most threatened ecosystems on Earth. Ocean warming, driven by climate change, causes coral bleaching events of increasing frequency and severity. When water temperatures exceed the thermal tolerance of the coral-algae partnership that sustains reef structure, the corals expel their symbiotic algae and begin to die. A bleached reef is a degraded reef. Its three-dimensional architectural complexity collapses, the diversity of species it supports plummets, and the productivity that sustains the entire food web diminishes. For mantis shrimps, reef degradation is an existential problem. The complex substrate that provides burrow opportunities, the density of prey populations that sustains their diet, the specific ecological conditions that support their reproductive cycles, all of these depend on a functioning reef. A bleached, rubble-strewn seafloor offers a pale shadow of the habitat that a healthy coral reef provides. Overfishing compounds the problem in different but equally damaging ways. The removal of large predatory fish, groupers, snappers, and others, through intensive fishing pressure, can alter the competitive dynamics of reef communities in ways that ripple through the system. But more directly, in many parts of the Indo-Pacific, mantis shrimps themselves are targeted by fishing operations, caught in traps, trawls, and by hand in shallow water fisheries, without any formal management framework governing how many can be sustainably removed. Ocean acidification, the reduction in seawater pH caused by the absorption of atmospheric carbon dioxide, presents another threat, both to the calcified structures of mantis shrimps themselves and to the shelled prey species on which smashing stomatopods depend. If the shells of mollusks become thinner and more brittle as acidification progresses, the ecological niche of the smasher-type mantis shrimp, built around the ability to fracture robust shells, may be subtly but significantly disrupted. Conservation efforts aimed at protecting mantis shrimps are in most cases necessarily indirect. They are the beneficiaries of broader reef conservation measures, the designation of marine protected areas, restrictions on destructive fishing practices such as dynamite fishing and cyanide fishing, and the global policy efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that drive both ocean warming and acidification. Within marine protected areas, mantis shrimp populations are consistently more abundant and more diverse than in equivalent unprotected habitats. This is not surprising. Protection from fishing reduces direct mortality, while the broader ecological health of protected reefs provides better habitat and prey availability. It is, in its way, an encouraging data point. When we protect the reef, the mantis shrimp benefits. When the mantis shrimp is present and healthy, the reef is better off for it. Some researchers have advocated for specific monitoring of stomatopod populations as indicators of reef health, using the density and diversity of mantis shrimps as a proxy for the overall condition of the benthic invertebrate community. This is an approach still in its early stages, but it reflects a growing recognition that mantis shrimps are not merely inhabitants of the reef. They are, in a meaningful ecological sense, a part of its architecture. There is also the matter of climate resilience. Some mantis shrimp species have demonstrated a capacity to tolerate a broader range of environmental conditions than the coral species that share their habitat. In reef areas that have experienced bleaching and some structural loss, mantis shrimps may persist in rubble zones and degraded substrate where few other specialist reef animals can survive. This resilience does not make them immune to reef decline, but it does mean that they may, in some scenarios, serve as a bridging presence, maintaining some predator function and bioturbation activity in degraded habitats until conditions improve or reef recovery occurs. It is a fragile hope, held against a formidable set of pressures, but it is perhaps consistent with what we know of this animal's character, a creature that has survived mass extinctions, climatic upheavals, and the transformation of entire ocean systems over 400 million years of evolutionary history. There is something in the mantis shrimp that is, at its core, stubbornly persistent. Part 7, Final Thoughts. Return, then, to the reef. The light is shifting as the day moves toward afternoon, the sun's angle changing the quality of the underwater illumination, casting longer shadows across the coral heads, deepening the colours of the seafloor. The hum and click of marine life continues, uninterrupted. This world does not pause for reflection. At the base of a coral head, the burrow entrance is quiet. The two-stalked eyes have retreated slightly inside. The sand around the entrance shows the faint disturbance of recent activity. A broken fragment of shell, the imprint of raptorial appendages in the soft substrate. Then the eyes appear again, rotating, scanning, taking in the reef in a way that no human observer can fully imagine. 16 photoreceptor types processing the incoming light into channels of information we have no sensory vocabulary to describe. Polarization signatures marking the bodies of other reef animals like signatures invisible to every other eye in the water. A small crab moves along the reef edge, perhaps 20 centimeters from the burrow opening. The calculation, if we can call it that, is brief. The mantis shrimp emerges, 4 body lengths, a pause, and then the strike. A blur in the water, a muffled percussion against the reef substrate, a moment of stillness. The crab does not move again. The mantis shrimp retrieves it and returns to the burrow entrance, its eyes still turning, still reading the reef, already attending to whatever comes next. What we have encountered here, in this small, vivid, extraordinary animal, is a life of astonishing completeness. A creature born into the open ocean as a fragment of transparency, carried by currents that neither it nor we can control, arriving somehow on the right piece of reef, finding shelter, growing through a series of vulnerable and formative stages into an adult predator of quiet, terrible efficiency. Developing a visual system that engineers are still working to understand, let alone replicate, using weapons whose mechanism has informed the design of impact-resistant materials used in human technology, molting, hunting, courting, brooding, defending, and doing all of this in a territory the size of a kitchen table, across a lifespan that may span 2 decades. The mantis shrimp asks nothing of us. It does not need our admiration or our attention. It has been doing this, in some form, in some ocean, in some era, for 400 million years, through conditions that ended the majority of Earth species. Its persistence is not accidental. It is the product of an extraordinary evolutionary investment in precision of vision, of impact, of behavior, of ecological fit. What it asks of us, if it asks anything at all, is that we do not take its reef away. Because without the reef, without that complex, light-filled, clicking, humming underwater architecture that has been its home since before the first dinosaur set foot on land, the mantis shrimp's extraordinary suite of adaptations has nowhere to express itself. The 16 photoreceptor types and the cavitation-generating strike, and the helicoidal dactyl heel, and the secret polarized light communication, all of it requires a functioning reef to mean anything. There are things on this planet that we cannot afford to lose, not because they are beautiful, though many of them are, but because they represent solutions, tested over geological time, to problems of survival that we're only beginning to understand. The mantis shrimp is one of those things, small, armed, ancient and stubborn. In the warm, humming water of a coral reef, it continues to do what it has always done, and the reef, for as long as it endures, is richer for its presence. If you enjoyed this episode of Animal Uncovered, following the podcast is the best way to support the show. And if there's an animal you want us to uncover next, leave a review or comment and let us know. Until next time.